Welcome back, boys. Today, I'm going to show y'all how I did a rear mount radiator in my drag car. So, here's the radiator. What I did is I converted a stand-up radiator that was up front and made it a lay-down radiator that sits horizontally. Now, the water pump I used was a Messier Enterprise independent water pump. And what I did was made my own bracket to mount this thing directly to the radiator. So there's going to be a hose connection between these two ports right here. Here is the part number for the Messier water neck fitting. And then this is the hose that we're going to be using. Now I have not trimmed the hose yet, but you guys can pretty much see how it's going to work. Now as far as things go, leaving the outlet here, we are going to be using braided hose running up to the front, hooking up to the block. And that braided hose will be returning the water to the radiator through this fitting. Now we will be using 1¼ inch braided hose. So you can see this is a huge fitting. It's just what it takes to get the job done. So now we're going to go over to the car in the rear, and I'm going to show you guys the tabs that I did to mount this thing. So coming over to the rear of the car, we have 4 tabs. So we have one right here, one right there, and there. So I think that is plenty of strength to hold this radiator. So I'm actually going to get it up in there and show you guys what it looks like. So I got the radiator in there. I made it a really nice and easy one-man job to put it in, and I'm really proud of what I made here. Now there is a fan and shroud that goes on the bottom of this that will suck air through the radiator down to the ground. There's also a possibility that we put the transcooler on top of this thing. Coming over to the water pump, we have plenty of clearance between it and the rear end. So I just have some bolts in there for mock-up, but you guys can just see we have really nice clearance and the thing lays very flat. Now there's one thing I still need to finish this job, and that is an expansion tank. Now when radiators are mounted flat like this, you run into an issue where it's hard to fill them up without having a bunch of air bubbles. So that spigot coming off the radiator going straight up will have a hose that gets clamped onto it and goes into the trunk where I'll have an expansion tank to fill up the radiator. Now the expansion tank will always have water in it, and it'll never allow air pockets to form because there will always be water on top of the radiator, and this pump will not be able to suck air into the system. So coming out of the outlet right there, we are planning to have a braided hose that goes straight up and comes across and then basically follows the same path that this fuel line is. So it'll go all the way up front here, but sadly there really isn't an engine in here where I can show you how it hook up, but I do have the fittings. So here's the fittings. They're from Messier as well. They're called block adapters. So instead of having a water pump, you have these, and you just hook your AN fittings up to it, and then you can run your hoses back to the rear of the car. Now, there will only be one line that runs up front to the block, because if you ran 2, water takes the path of least resistance. So, one side of the block could be getting cooled better than the other side, and you just don't want that. So the guys from Messier told me to run one line up front, do a Y connection off of it, and then hook up to those 2 block adapters. Now what that also does is saves me a whole lot of room because these lines are pretty thick in diameter. Now this project was pretty aggravating just because of getting all the tabs right and making this thing flat and welding it all. But in the end, I thought it was a really cool finished product, and all I really need to do is put an expansion tank on this thing and I'm good to go. And I'll also have a picture showing you guys how I use these jacks to mount the thing. And another thing I really liked about this was it taught me how to weld aluminum. This is my first time ever doing it, and now I can pretty much weld anything. I've already welded a transmission case for someone, and it turned out great. But that's all I got for today, boys. I really hope you guys enjoyed this, and stay tuned for the next video because we will be moving the engine back 3 inches, and I'm going to videotape everything I do.